In the ancient kingdoms of India, where magnificent palaces stood beside crowded cities and where merchants traveled across distant lands searching for fortune, there lived a wealthy man whose fate had suddenly changed. Once, he had possessed great wealth. His home was filled with precious goods. His servants respected him. His name was known among merchants throughout the southern city. People believed his fortune would last forever. But life is like a river that never stops moving. What rises may eventually fall. What appears permanent may disappear like morning mist beneath the sun. Through a series of unfortunate events, the merchant's wealth slowly disappeared. His businesses failed. His possessions were sold one by one. The treasures that once filled his house vanished. The servants who once surrounded him left. The doors of his mansion, once open to many guests, became quiet and empty. The man who had once lived in comfort now struggled to survive. He wore simple clothes. He ate simple meals. He walked through the streets carrying the weight of his worries. Many people who had once praised him now ignored him. Some even looked down upon him. They remembered his wealth. But they forgot his kindness. They remembered his success. But they disappeared when he needed help. The merchant experienced a painful truth of the human world. Many people are attracted to fortune. But few remain loyal during hardship. However, even in his difficult situation, the merchant did not allow bitterness to destroy his heart. He understood that wealth could disappear. But wisdom and character were still within his control. Although he had lost his possessions, he had not lost his ability to think clearly. Among all the people who knew him, there was one person who still treated him as a friend. This person was the royal barber. The barber worked inside the palace of the king. Every day, he entered the royal chambers. He served the king. He heard conversations among nobles. He saw the treasures and luxury surrounding the royal family. Unlike ordinary people, he had access to a world hidden behind palace walls. When the barber heard that his old friend had fallen into poverty, he decided to visit him. One evening, the barber arrived at the merchant's humble home. The merchant welcomed him warmly. Although his circumstances had changed, his heart remained generous. He offered his guest the best food he could provide. The barber looked around the small house. He saw the empty shelves. He saw the simple furniture. He saw how much his friend's life had changed. But instead of feeling compassion, a different thought appeared in his mind. A dangerous thought. A thought created by greed. The barber remembered the treasures inside the royal palace. He remembered the jewels worn by the king. He remembered the valuable ornaments stored within the palace. And slowly, a dark idea began forming. He thought, if only I could obtain some of that wealth, my friend would no longer suffer. I would also become rich. At once, all my problems would disappear. At first, the thought seemed like a solution. But greed often disguises itself as a good intention. A person may tell themselves they are seeking happiness. They may tell themselves they are helping others. But beneath those words, there may be only desire. The barber looked at his friend and said, "My friend, I know you're suffering. I know that you have lost everything, but perhaps there is a way for us to change our fate." The merchant looked at him carefully. "What do you mean?" The barber moved closer and lowered his voice. "There are treasures inside the royal palace. The king possesses countless jewels and precious objects. If we could obtain even a small portion of them, your troubles would disappear." The merchant became silent. He immediately understood the direction of the conversation. His expression became serious. "Friend," he said, "be careful with your words. The wealth of the palace does not belong to us. Taking it through wrongdoing will only create disaster." The barber shook his head. "You worry too much. Think about it. The king often sleeps alone in the garden. The palace is filled with treasures. With the right opportunity, we could change our lives forever." The merchant listened. But unlike the barber, his mind remained clear. He saw not only the possible reward. He saw the danger hidden behind the desire. He knew, a treasure gained through evil actions carries a price far greater than its value. The merchant took a deep breath. "Friend, wealth is not worth risking your life. To harm another person for money is a path that leads only to suffering. We must find another way." But the barber's mind was already captured by greed. The image of gold. The image of jewels. The image of sudden wealth. These thoughts became louder than wisdom. And once greed takes control of the mind, even a warning from a true friend can become difficult to hear. That night, two people sat together. One still held wisdom. The other had already begun walking toward darkness, and neither of them knew that this single desire would soon lead to a terrible consequence. The night grew darker over the southern city. Inside the small house of the fallen merchant, two old friends continued their conversation. The oil lamp between them flickered softly. Its weak light reflected on their faces. One face carried concern. The other carried desire. The merchant looked at his friend and hoped that his words could awaken wisdom. "Friend," he said gently, "think carefully before doing anything. Life is difficult now, but difficulties can change. Poverty is painful, but it does not justify committing evil. The wealth of the palace may appear attractive, but it is protected by the power of the king. If we choose a wrong path, the consequences may be far greater than our suffering today. The barber listened. But his mind was no longer focused on the merchant's advice. Instead, he imagined the treasures hidden inside the royal palace. He imagined golden ornaments, precious jewels, silk garments, a life without worry. The more he imagined, the stronger his desire became. Why should some people have endless wealth while others struggle? The barber asked. Why should the king possess so many treasures while my friend suffers? The merchant shook his head. Friend, this is not justice. It is only desire wearing the appearance of justice. The barber became quiet. Those words touched a place deep inside him. For a brief moment, he understood. He understood that he was not truly trying to help. He understood that his heart was being pulled by greed. But that moment passed quickly. The image of wealth returned. And greed became louder than wisdom. The barber leaned closer. I have thought about everything. There is no need for a dangerous battle. No one needs to know. The king often rests alone in the royal garden. The guards are not always nearby. If we act carefully, we can take the treasures and leave without anyone discovering us. The merchant immediately became serious. He realized that his friend was no longer simply discussing an idea. He was making a plan. Stop, the merchant said. You are walking toward a path that cannot be returned from. Murder is not a solution to poverty. Taking another person's life for wealth is the beginning of endless suffering. The barber looked frustrated. You always think about danger. You never think about opportunity. The merchant replied calmly, a wise person sees both. A foolish person sees only what they desire. The barber stood up. His eyes showed impatience. You are afraid. You have lost your courage because of poverty. The merchant remained calm. No. I have lost my wealth, but I have not lost my understanding. A person who acts without thinking is not brave. He is only controlled by impulse. The barber did not want to hear more. He believed his friend was too weak to understand the opportunity before them. He believed courage meant taking risks. He believed wealth was worth any danger. But the merchant knew something different. He knew that the mind can become a prisoner of its own desires. When greed becomes strong, people stop seeing reality clearly. They see only the reward. They forget the cost. The barber eventually left the merchant's house. But the conversation did not leave his mind. All night, he could not sleep. He walked through the streets of the city. The palace stood in the distance. Its golden roofs reflected the moonlight. To ordinary people, the palace represented power and beauty. To the barber, it represented treasure waiting to be taken. He stared at the palace walls. His heart became filled with excitement. He whispered, "Soon, my life will change. I will no longer be poor. I will no longer be forgotten." But he did not see the danger hidden behind those walls. He did not see the guards. He did not see the consequences. He only saw gold. The next day, the barber continued his work inside the palace. He shaved the king's beard. He arranged the king's hair. He performed his duties as usual. But while his hands worked, his mind was somewhere else. He observed every detail. He remembered the location of the garden. He noticed the guards' movements. He studied the palace routines. Every piece of information became part of his secret plan. The king trusted him. The palace allowed him inside. And instead of respecting that trust, he began using it for betrayal. This is one of the most dangerous changes that can happen within a person. A wrong thought repeated many times becomes a decision. A decision repeated many times becomes an action. And an action eventually creates a result. The barber had not yet committed the crime. But the seed of the action had already been planted. Meanwhile, the merchant continued living in poverty. But unlike his friend, he remained peaceful. He had little wealth. Yet his mind was clear. He understood, a poor person with wisdom can still live with dignity. A wealthy person controlled by greed can still live in misery. That evening, the merchant looked toward the palace from afar. He silently hoped that his friend would change his mind. He hoped that wisdom would overcome desire. But far away, inside the palace walls, the barber had already made his choice. The temptation of gold had become stronger than the voice of conscience. And the path toward his fate had begun. The days passed after the conversation between the two friends. The merchant continued living his humble life. Although his house was no longer filled with treasures, it still carried something more valuable. Peace. He woke every morning knowing that he had little. But he also knew that he had not lost himself. He had lost wealth. He had lost status. He had lost the respect of many people. But he had not lost his ability to distinguish right from wrong. The barber, however, walked a completely different path. Every day inside the palace, he saw the luxury surrounding the king. The golden decorations, the precious jewelry, the rare fabrics, the countless signs of royal power. Before, these things were simply part of his work. Now, they became objects of desire. The same palace that once represented honor and service had become, in his mind, a place of opportunity. A place where he imagined his future wealth waiting. The barber began secretly preparing. He watched the movements of the palace guards. He learned when the king walked through the garden. He noticed which areas were quiet at night. He memorized the paths that could lead into the royal garden. Every small detail strengthened his confidence. But confidence without wisdom can become dangerous. The barber believed he was becoming clever. In reality, he was simply becoming more deeply trapped by greed. One evening, before carrying out his plan, the barber returned once again to visit the merchant. Perhaps somewhere inside, a small part of him still hoped for approval. Perhaps he wanted his friend to tell him that his plan was acceptable. But the merchant immediately understood why he had come. The moment he saw the expression on the barber's face, he knew. The desire had not disappeared. It had grown stronger. "Friend," the merchant said, "I hope you have abandoned this thought." The barber remained silent. The merchant continued, "The path you are considering will not bring happiness. You may gain gold, but you will lose your peace. You may escape poverty, but you will create a burden that follows you forever." The barber looked away. "Easy words," he said. "You speak like someone who has nothing to lose." The merchant looked at him with sadness. "I have lost much. But I still have my conscience. What is the value of gaining everything outside while losing everything inside?" The barber became impatient. "You do not understand. You have accepted your fate. But I refuse to remain poor." The merchant replied, "Wanting a better life is not wrong. Everyone hopes for improvement. But the way we choose matters. A person who climbs upward by stepping on others will eventually fall. A person who builds success through wrongdoing builds a house on unstable ground." The barber shook his head. "You always speak about morality. But morality does not fill an empty stomach." The merchant answered, "Perhaps not immediately. But wrongdoing will never bring true satisfaction. An empty stomach can be filled. But a corrupted heart is much harder to heal." The barber did not respond. Because deep inside, he knew his friend was speaking truth. But knowing the truth and following the truth are not always the same. Many people understand what is right. Yet they still choose what they desire. The barber had already decided. That night, he prepared everything. He selected a sharp knife. He chose dark clothing. He waited until the palace became quiet. The moon rose above the city. The streets became empty. The palace guards continued their duties. Inside the royal chambers, the king rested peacefully, unaware of the danger approaching. The barber looked at the knife in his hand. For a moment, hesitation appeared. A small voice inside him asked, "Is this truly the path you want? Are jewels worth a life? Is wealth worth losing your own humanity?" But once again, the image of gold appeared. The imagined treasure drowned out the voice of conscience. The barber whispered, "Only tonight. After this, everything will change." He believed one action could solve all his problems. He believed one crime could create a better future. But he did not understand, a single harmful action can create consequences far beyond what the mind can imagine. The barber slowly moved toward the palace. The same walls that had once welcomed him as a trusted servant now stood before him like a judgment. Every step carried him closer to his choice. Closer to the result of his desire. The palace garden was quiet. The trees moved gently in the night breeze. The flowers released their fragrance beneath the moonlight. Everything in nature remained peaceful. Only one human heart was filled with darkness. The barber carefully entered the royal garden. He believed he was walking toward treasure. He believed he was walking toward freedom. But unknowingly, he was walking toward the consequence that had already been created by his own thoughts. The royal garden slept beneath the silver light of the moon. The flowers moved gently with the night breeze. The ancient trees stood quietly, their shadows stretching across the pathways. Small insects moved among the grass. The fountains continued flowing softly. Everything inside the garden carried a feeling of peace. But beneath this peaceful appearance, danger had entered. The barber moved silently between the trees. He held the knife tightly in his hand. His breathing became slower. His footsteps became more careful. He believed that he was close to changing his fate. In his mind, he imagined the moment when he would find the king's treasures. He imagined the jewels. He imagined the gold. He imagined returning to the city as a wealthy man. The poor barber who had once struggled would disappear. A new life would begin. These thoughts filled him with confidence. But greed had created an illusion. It showed him only the reward. It hid everything else. It hid the danger. It hid the suffering. It hid the consequences. The barber continued deeper into the garden. He remembered the information he had gathered. He knew where the king usually rested. He knew the paths that were less guarded. He believed everything was under his control. But there was one thing he did not know. One thing he had never considered. The king was not alone. In the quiet corner of the royal garden, near the place where the king rested, there was a powerful guardian. A great male lion. The king had raised and trained this lion for many years. The animal lived near the royal garden as a protector. It was loyal. It was alert. And it could recognize danger immediately. The barber knew about the palace. He knew about the treasures. He knew about the guards, but he did not know about the lion. His greed had made him careless. A person controlled by desire often sees only what they want to see. They ignore what threatens their plan. They ignore warnings. They ignore reality. The barber continued walking. The leaves beneath his feet made a soft sound. He stopped. He looked around. Nothing moved. He smiled quietly. Everything is going perfectly. He whispered. He did not know that unseen eyes were already watching him. The lion lifted its head. The scent of an unfamiliar person entered the night air. The animal became alert. Its ears moved. Its muscles tightened. The peaceful guardian transformed into a protector. The barber continued forward. He was only a short distance away from the sleeping king. His hand touched the knife. His heart beat faster. This is it, he thought. Everything will change tonight. But before he could move closer, a deep sound broke the silence. A low growl. The barber froze. His body became cold. Slowly, he turned around. In the darkness between the trees, two bright eyes appeared. The eyes belonged to the lion. For the first time that night, the barber felt true fear. The golden treasure he had imagined disappeared from his mind. The confidence he had carried vanished. He finally saw the reality of his situation. He was not walking toward wealth. He was standing inside danger. The lion watched him carefully. It did not understand his human thoughts. It did not know about his greed. It only knew one thing: an unknown intruder had entered the place it was meant to protect. The barber slowly stepped backward. His hand trembled. The knife that had once made him feel powerful now felt useless. A weapon created by greed could not protect him from the consequences of greed. The lion moved forward. The barber's heart raced. He wanted to run. He wanted to escape. He wanted to return to the moment before he made this choice. But time does not move backward. A person may choose an action in a single moment. But the result of that action may already be waiting. The barber looked toward the sleeping king. Then he looked toward the path behind him. For a brief moment, he understood. His friend had warned him. The merchant had tried to save him from this path. But he had refused to listen. The danger was not created tonight. It was created the moment greed entered his heart. The lion took another step forward. The garden remained silent. The moon continued shining. The flowers continued blooming. The world itself remained unchanged. Only one person was facing the result of his own desire. The silence of the royal garden was suddenly broken. The barber stood frozen beneath the moonlight. The knife in his hand no longer represented courage. It represented the choice he had made. The lion slowly moved closer. Every step was powerful and controlled. The animal did not rush. It did not act from anger. It acted from instinct. It was protecting the place entrusted to it. The barber's mind became filled with fear. Only moments earlier, he had imagined himself becoming wealthy. He had imagined holding precious jewels. He had imagined escaping poverty forever. But now, all those dreams disappeared. The gold he wanted could not save him. The treasure he desired could not protect him. His plan, which had seemed so clever, suddenly appeared foolish. He finally understood what his friend had tried to tell him. The danger was not only outside. The greatest danger had been inside his own mind. His greed had hidden reality from him. It had made him believe that desire was wisdom. It had made him believe that wrongdoing was opportunity. It had made him believe that he could control the outcome. But no person can escape the consequences created by their own actions. The barber slowly stepped backward. His breathing became heavier. He wanted to explain. He wanted to convince the lion that he meant no harm. But the lion did not understand human excuses. It only recognized an intruder. The barber looked around desperately. The garden walls were high. The paths were unfamiliar. The king was still sleeping. There was nowhere to hide. The person who had entered secretly now wished only to escape. But the path of greed had already brought him to a place from which there was no easy return. The lion suddenly moved. The barber cried out. The peaceful garden became a place of fear. The flowers that had witnessed his entrance now witnessed the result of his choice. The guards heard the sound and rushed toward the garden. They arrived too late. The lion had already ended the threat. The barber lay motionless beneath the trees. The knife that he had carried remained beside him. The object he believed would help him obtain wealth had become useless. His plan to steal treasure had not brought him riches. It had only taken away his life. The guards looked at the scene with shock. They wondered, why would someone risk everything to enter the royal garden? Why would someone attempt to harm the king? The answer was hidden in the human heart. Greed. A desire that grows without wisdom. A desire that convinces people to sacrifice what they already have for something they do not need. The next morning, the news spread throughout the palace. The king learned what had happened. He looked at the place where the barber had fallen. He was not filled with pride. He was not filled with anger. Instead, he felt sadness, because another human life had been destroyed by uncontrolled desire. The king asked his ministers, "Who was this person?" They discovered that the man was the royal barber. A person who had served the palace. A person who had been trusted. This made the event even more tragic. The barber had not been a stranger. He had been someone who had received trust and opportunity. Yet he allowed greed to transform that trust into betrayal. The king said, "This is a lesson for all people. Danger does not always come from enemies. Sometimes danger comes from the desires we allow to grow within ourselves." The story of the barber quickly spread beyond the palace. People discussed the tragedy. Some blamed the barber. Some felt pity for him. But wise people understood the deeper lesson. The barber was destroyed before the lion ever attacked him. His physical death happened in the garden. But his downfall began much earlier. It began when he allowed greed to overcome wisdom. It began when he ignored the advice of a true friend. It began when he valued wealth above life and morality. The lion was only the final consequence. The true cause was inside his own heart. Meanwhile, the merchant who had warned him heard the news. He sat quietly. His heart was heavy. He had tried to stop his friend. He had spoken honestly. He had offered a different path. But he could not force another person to choose wisely. This is one of the deepest truths of life. A person can offer guidance. A person can share wisdom. But each being must walk their own path. The merchant looked toward the palace. He whispered, "May this lesson guide others. May people understand that greed promises happiness but creates suffering. May they learn that wisdom is more valuable than gold." The world continued moving. The palace continued standing. The gardens continued blooming. But the story of the barber remained as a warning. A warning that the greatest dangers are not always found outside. Sometimes the most dangerous enemy is the desire hidden within the heart. Many years after the tragic event in the royal garden, the Buddha was residing at Jetavana Monastery with his disciples. The peaceful atmosphere of the monastery was filled with the sound of gentle wind moving through the trees. The monks gathered together after their daily practices. Among them, some were discussing a story they had recently heard. They spoke about the barber who had attempted to harm the king because of greed. They wondered how a person could abandon reason so completely. How could someone who had a respected position in the palace throw away his life for wealth? How could desire become so powerful that it destroyed his own wisdom? The monks discussed the nature of greed. They understood that greed was dangerous. But they still wondered why some people became completely controlled by it. The Buddha, who heard their conversation, approached calmly. His presence brought silence. The monks respectfully bowed. The Buddha said, "Monks, do not think that such behavior appears only in this lifetime. When the mind is controlled by greed, a person may abandon wisdom even when the consequences are clear. In the past, there was also someone who destroyed himself because he could not control his desire. Listen carefully, and I will tell you the story." The monks gathered around. The lamps of Jetavana glowed softly. The night became quiet. And the Buddha began revealing an ancient event from a previous life. Long ago, in a southern kingdom of India, there lived a wealthy merchant. He had once enjoyed great prosperity. His house was filled with precious goods. His name was respected. His life was comfortable. But fortune is never permanent. Through unexpected changes, the merchant gradually lost his wealth. His businesses failed. His possessions disappeared. The people who once surrounded him left. The merchant experienced hardship. Yet unlike many who lose everything, he did not lose his wisdom. He understood that wealth was temporary. He understood that reputation could change. But the quality of one's heart was something that could still be protected. Among all the people who knew him, there was one friend who remained connected to him. This friend was a royal barber. The barber worked inside the palace of the king. Because of his position, he saw the wealth and luxury of the royal family every day. He saw treasures that ordinary people could only imagine. Golden ornaments, precious jewels, rare objects collected from distant lands. Over time, the barber became attached to these things. At first, the desire was small. A simple thought. A passing wish. But he did not let it disappear. Instead, he continued feeding it. And a small desire slowly became a powerful obsession. When the barber visited the poor merchant, he saw his friends suffering. But instead of only feeling compassion, his mind created another idea. He thought, if my friend could have some of the king's wealth, his problems would disappear. At first, the thought seemed like kindness. But beneath it was hidden greed. The barber did not only want to help his friend. He also wanted wealth for himself. This is one of the dangers of desire. Sometimes greed does not appear with an ugly face. Sometimes it appears wearing the mask of kindness. A person may say, "I am doing this for someone else." But deep inside, they may be following their own craving. The barber eventually shared his plan with the merchant. He suggested entering the royal garden while the king rested alone. He suggested taking the king's treasures. He believed that one action could change their lives forever. But the merchant immediately understood the danger. He warned, "Friend, do not follow this path. Gold obtained through harm will never bring peace. A person who destroys another life for wealth also destroys their own future." The barber refused to listen. His desire had already become stronger than reason. The Buddha paused for a moment. Then he looked at the monks and said, "Monks, this is how greed works. It begins as a small thought. If a person does not observe the mind carefully, that thought grows. Eventually, the person no longer controls desire. Desire controls the person." The monks listened deeply. They realized that the greatest battles are not always fought outside. The greatest battles often happen within the mind. The Buddha continued, "A wise person does not measure only what can be gained. A wise person also considers what may be lost. The foolish person sees only the sweetness of the reward. He does not see the poison hidden within it." The monks reflected on these words. They understood that the barber's tragedy did not begin when he entered the royal garden. It began much earlier. It began when he allowed greed to grow inside his heart. The Buddha continued speaking to the monks beneath the peaceful night sky of Jetavana Monastery. "Monks, the mind is like a garden. If we carefully plant good seeds and protect them, beautiful flowers will grow. But if we allow harmful seeds to grow without attention, they will eventually cover the entire garden. The thoughts we accept today become the actions we perform tomorrow." The monks listened carefully. They understood that the Buddha was not only telling a story about a barber and a merchant. He was teaching them about the nature of the human mind. The barber's downfall did not happen because of one sudden mistake. It happened because of many small choices. a moment of admiration for wealth, a moment of comparison, a moment of dissatisfaction, a moment of believing that happiness could be purchased through possessions. Each small thought became a seed, and each time he fed those thoughts, they became stronger. The Buddha said, when a person sees another's fortune and allows jealousy to arise, suffering begins. When a person believes that happiness exists only in obtaining more, they become trapped. Desire always promises that the next thing will finally bring peace. But after obtaining that thing, the mind immediately searches for something else. This is the endless cycle created by greed. The monks reflected deeply. They had seen this truth in the world around them. People who had little often wished for more. People who had much often still feared losing it. The problem was not wealth itself. The problem was the attachment created by the mind. The Buddha continued, gold is not evil. Jewels are not evil. Possessions are not evil. But when the heart becomes controlled by attachment, even ordinary things can become the cause of suffering. The merchant in the story understood this. Although he had lost his wealth, he did not allow his mind to become poor. He still possessed wisdom. He still possessed kindness. He still understood the value of life. The barber, however, possessed a different kind of poverty. His hands were empty before. But later, even when his mind was filled with thoughts of treasure, he remained poor inside. Because true wealth is not measured only by what one owns. True wealth is measured by the peace within the heart. The Buddha looked at the monks and continued, consider the difference between these two people. One lost his possessions but protected his virtue. One chased possessions and lost his life. The monks understood. The merchant had less gold. But he had greater wisdom. The barber wanted more gold. But he lost everything. This is the strange nature of greed. It convinces people that they are moving toward happiness. Yet step by step, it moves them away from peace. The Buddha then explained another important truth. Before a harmful action appears in the world, it first appears in the mind. Before a person harms another, they first create the intention to harm. Therefore, the wise person watches the mind carefully. The monks thought about the barber. His crime did not begin with the knife. It began with a thought. The knife was only the final expression of what had already grown inside. The Buddha continued, a person should not underestimate small negative thoughts. A tiny spark can create a great fire. A small drop of poison can harm the body. Likewise, a small unchecked desire can eventually destroy a life. The monks became silent. They realized how important mindfulness was. A person cannot always control what appears in the mind. But they can choose what they encourage. They can choose what they follow. They can choose what they allow to grow. The Buddha then spoke about the merchant's wisdom. Monks, the merchant also faced suffering. He lost wealth. He experienced rejection. He knew hardship. But he did not allow suffering to become hatred. He did not allow poverty to destroy his understanding. The monks recognized the difference. Two people faced difficulty. One responded with patience. One responded with greed. One protected his inner peace. One destroyed his own future. The Buddha said, "The world often believes success means gaining more. But true success is not measured by accumulation. True success is the ability to remain wise and compassionate under difficult conditions." The monks bowed their heads. They understood. The merchant was not truly poor. The barber was not truly rich, because the value of a person is not determined by possessions. It is determined by the quality of their heart. The Buddha continued, "When desire becomes stronger than wisdom, a person walks toward suffering. When wisdom becomes stronger than desire, a person walks toward freedom. Therefore, train the mind. Observe your thoughts. Do not allow greed to become your master." The night at Jetavana Monastery became even quieter. The monks sat in meditation. They reflected on their own hearts. They asked themselves, "What seeds am I planting? Am I growing compassion, or am I feeding desire?" The story of the barber was not only about someone from the past. It was a mirror. A mirror showing every person the hidden movements of their own mind. Because within every heart exists a choice. A choice between wisdom and desire. Between patience and impulse. Between peace and suffering. The Buddha continued his teaching beneath the quiet lamps of Jetavana Monastery. "Monks, every action has a consequence. Some consequences appear quickly. Some consequences appear after a long time. But no action disappears without leaving a trace." The monks listened carefully. They understood that the story of the barber was not only about punishment. It was about understanding cause and effect. The barber entered the royal garden believing that he was moving toward happiness. But he did not realize that his own thoughts had already created the path leading to suffering. The Buddha said, "People often look for enemies outside themselves. They blame others for their difficulties. They believe suffering comes only from external causes. But many forms of suffering begin within the mind." The monks reflected on these words. The barber had blamed poverty. He had blamed unfairness. He had blamed the difference between himself and the king. But the true cause of his destruction was not poverty. It was not the palace. It was not the king. It was the greed he allowed to grow inside his own heart. The Buddha continued, "A person who cannot control desire becomes like someone carrying a heavy burden. At first, the burden may seem small. But with every attachment, more weight is added. Eventually, the person becomes exhausted by the very thing they once wanted." The monks understood. The barber had wanted wealth because he believed wealth would bring freedom. But his desire for wealth had taken away his freedom. Before he entered the garden, he was already a prisoner. Not a prisoner of the palace. Not a prisoner of guards. But a prisoner of his own craving. The Buddha then explained the difference between wise and unwise desire. "Monks, there are two kinds of wishes. One wish is guided by wisdom. Another wish is guided by greed. A wise wish encourages effort, patience, and kindness. A greedy wish ignores consequences and only seeks immediate satisfaction." The barber's wish was not wrong because he wanted a better life. The wish for improvement is natural. The problem was the path he chose. He wanted the result but refused the responsibility. He wanted wealth but ignored morality. He wanted happiness but created suffering. The Buddha said, "When a person plants a seed of poison, they cannot expect a sweet fruit. When a person plants a seed of greed, they cannot expect a harvest of peace." The monks became silent. They understood the simplicity and depth of this teaching. Life often reflects what people cultivate within themselves. A heart filled with anger creates conflict. A heart filled with greed creates dissatisfaction. A heart filled with compassion creates peace. The Buddha continued, "The barber had a friend who offered him wisdom. The merchant did not abandon him. The merchant did not criticize him with hatred. He simply tried to guide him toward a better path." The monks remembered this important detail. The merchant was not only a victim of the barber's plan. He was also someone who tried to prevent the tragedy. He represented wisdom. The barber represented uncontrolled desire. The Buddha said, "When someone gives advice from compassion, we should listen carefully. Not every warning is meant to limit us. Some warnings are meant to protect us from suffering." The monks reflected. Many times, people reject advice because it challenges their desires. They believe the person warning them does not understand. They believe caution is weakness. But sometimes, the person offering a warning sees the danger more clearly. The merchant saw what the barber could not see. He saw that gold obtained through violence was not wealth. It was a hidden disaster. The Buddha then spoke about trust. Monks, trust is a precious gift. When someone gives trust, it should be protected. The barber was trusted by the king. He was allowed to enter the palace. He was given a position of responsibility. But instead of honoring that trust, he used it for wrongdoing. The monks understood. The barber's action was harmful not only because he wanted treasure. It was harmful because he betrayed a relationship of trust. The Buddha said, "A person who breaks trust for personal gain may receive something temporary. But they lose something far more valuable. They lose the respect of others. They lose peace within themselves. They lose the purity of their own heart." The monks sat quietly. The story became more than a tale of a failed crime. It became a lesson about every choice made in daily life. Every thought. Every intention. Every action. All move in a direction. The Buddha concluded, "Therefore, guard your mind. Before controlling your actions, learn to understand your thoughts. When the mind is peaceful, actions become peaceful. When the mind is poisoned, actions become harmful." The night continued at Jetavana. The monks remained in deep reflection. The story of the barber had become a mirror. A mirror showing that the greatest victories and defeats begin inside the mind. The night at Jetavana Monastery remained peaceful. The monks sat quietly before the Buddha, reflecting on the story of the barber. They had understood the danger of greed. They had understood the importance of wisdom. But there was still a deeper meaning hidden within this ancient story. The Buddha looked at the monks and continued, "Monks, the events I have described did not happen only in the distant past. The connections between beings continue across many lifetimes. The choices we make create relationships. The actions we perform create consequences. The monks listened carefully. They knew that the Buddha's teachings often revealed the hidden connections between past and present. The Buddha said, "In that past life, the poor merchant who maintained wisdom and kindness was none other than myself." The monks were filled with respect. They understood that the Buddha's path of compassion was not something that appeared suddenly. It had been cultivated through countless experiences. Through many lives, the Buddha had practiced patience. Through many lives, he had protected wisdom. Through many lives, he had chosen what was right even when circumstances were difficult. The Buddha continued, "The royal barber who was overcome by greed was Devadatta." The monks became silent. They knew the name. They knew Devadatta as someone who had created difficulties because of jealousy and ambition. The Buddha explained, Devadatta had repeatedly allowed desire and pride to control his mind. He saw what he wanted to see. He ignored wisdom when wisdom challenged his desires. This was not created in only one moment. It was the result of habits formed through many choices. The monks reflected deeply. They understood that character is not created by a single action. It is created by repeated thoughts. Repeated thoughts become habits. Habits become character. And character shapes destiny. The Buddha continued, "The king in that story was also connected through previous causes. The lion that protected the king was also part of the unfolding of karma. Every being was moving according to the results of previous actions." The monks listened. They understood that karma was not a simple punishment system. It was not about a powerful being deciding rewards and punishments. Karma was the natural result of causes and conditions. A seed produces a tree. A tree produces fruit. In the same way, thoughts and actions eventually produce results. The Buddha said, "Do not think that karma means fate cannot change. The purpose of understanding karma is not to create fear. The purpose is to create wisdom. If you understand that actions have results, you can choose better actions." The monks felt encouraged by these words. The Buddha was not teaching them to fear the future. He was teaching them to take responsibility for the present. Every moment offered a choice. A choice to follow greed or wisdom. A choice to follow anger or compassion. A choice to follow selfishness or kindness. The Buddha returned to the story of the barber. He said, "Monks, observe carefully. The barber wanted treasure. But because of his greed, he lost his life. The merchant had little wealth. But because of wisdom, he preserved peace. This is the difference between outer possessions and inner treasure." The monks understood. The world often measures success by what people collect. Gold, land, objects, recognition. But the Buddha taught that these things are temporary. The true treasures are qualities of the heart: compassion, wisdom, patience, honesty. A person may lose material possessions, but if they protect these qualities, they are never truly poor. A person may possess great wealth, but if they lose these qualities, they have already lost something essential. The Buddha continued, the barber believed the king's treasure would solve his problems, but he did not understand that the greatest problem was within himself. He wanted to change his external situation while ignoring the condition of his own heart. The monks reflected. This teaching applied not only to wealth. It applied to every human desire. Some people believe, if I gain more money, I will finally be happy. If I receive more recognition, I will finally feel complete. If I control more things, I will finally feel safe. But the Buddha taught, without inner peace, external achievements cannot create lasting happiness. The Buddha concluded, therefore, train the mind before seeking to control the world. When the mind is clear, decisions become clear. When the mind is confused, even opportunities can become dangers. The monks bowed respectfully. They understood the deeper message of the story. The barber was not destroyed because he lacked opportunity. He was destroyed because he lacked wisdom. The merchant was not protected because he possessed wealth. He was protected because he possessed clarity. The greatest protection in life is not found outside. It is found within a peaceful and awakened heart.